I'm back with investigative writer Julie Kelly. She writes for American Greatness, and you got to get a copy of her new book. It's a bestseller already, but we want to put it to number one on the bestseller list. It's called January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, I was delighted to see you're actually giving a portion of your profits on the book to the Patriot Freedom Project. So, here we have in Julie someone who's really committed to the cause, really committed to what she's writing about. And Julie, we were talking about you mentioned at the end the Whitmer case, and how the Whitmer case is a sort of interesting forerunner for January 6th. And in fact, the FBI agent who supervised the Whitmer case was very interestingly then transferred to D.C. and apparently given an important position in the January 6th investigation. Talk about how the Whitmer case, talk about the degree of FBI involvement and how the case is falling apart.
I mean, Dinesh, you could not, if you tried, write fiction about a FBI plot than we have in the Whitmer case. So you have at least one FBI informant or agent, including undercover agents, per defendant in this case. What they did was they lured people into this kidnapping scheme. They concocted it. They organized and paid for all of the optics related to this that's now used as evidence. Surveillance trips, training trips, rifle trips, how to build a mock-up of her cottage. And so this was completely led by the FBI field office in Detroit. The top three FBI agents, however, had been removed from the case, removed from the government's witness list before the trial starts on March 8th. The top FBI agent who signed the initial federal criminal complaint has been fired by the FBI for beating up his wife. And one of the top informants, the guy who organized all these trips, is a convicted felon, now accused of being a double agent, and committed at least two other crimes while he was working this kidnapping caper. So this not only is falling apart, but it's very illuminating, once again, to see the extent to which this FBI will go to entrap people on the right, to use it to target Donald Trump, which is exactly what it did, because the news was announced on October 8th of 2020 as voting was underway in Michigan. It led to all sorts of negative headlines about Trump. And now here we see the case falling apart. And as you said, the head of that field office was moved to the DC field office a week after the arrest announcements were made. So he's been there since the middle of October, then managing that office, which is handling all of the cases related to the January 6th FBI investigation.
Now, Julie, when the FBI embeds its agents in an operation like this, they generally like to say, listen, these guys are plotting this horrible thing. We have our guys in there, so they've got to sort of pretend to be part of the operation because otherwise they will immediately fall under suspicion. But I think what's interesting is you quote in your book the fact that in a number of cases, the defendants could not afford to do the things that the FBI was trying to get them to do, so the FBI had to pay for it. And in some cases, defendants even pushed back against the FBI and said, listen, we don't want to do that, or we have no interest in that. And the FBI was like, yeah, you got to do it. So give an example or two of how the FBI, in a sense, made this operation occur, and it would not have occurred without FBI involvement by them pushing it forward.
The lead kidnapper, Adam Fox, was the guy hard on his luck who lived in the basement of his friend's vacuum shop. None of these men had any sort of means whatsoever. And so even when they were trying to organize these surveillance trips and they would say, look, we have no money, we don't even have a car, we can't go to, outside in Wisconsin and conduct a fake surveillance trip to prepare for the kidnapping. The FBI informants paid for everything. The lead informant was paid more than $50,000, given a new car, compensated for a loss when he sold his house for 6 months of work. And so the defense attorneys have really laid out in detail not only how they funded all of this, how they lured these men into the trap, into the FBI trap, but also just, they have almost 300 examples of communication between the informants and FBI agents that talk about how they were going to fight the resistance by these defendants to to conduct this kidnapping plot. And so they've got a ton of evidence. They've asked to dismiss the case, defense attorneys, of course. I doubt the judge will. Kind of hope that he doesn't, because we need this trial to go forward so we can get all of this information to the public. Because you know what, Dinesh? The national news media has completely memory hold this. You will not find one article in the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Politico. I just had a piece up this week. I went through all the major news organizations. There's not a single story about this Whitmer kidnapping keeper, even though it's completely scandalous and salacious, and any other time it would be great front page headlines. But they have completely black hold this and will not talk about this anywhere in the news media.
I mean, this is, Julie, I would say the indispensability of you. And of course, I think as a writer, it's in a way fortunate because you have the field all to yourself. You're doing reporting that is within the access of other people to do, but for ideological reasons, they won't do it. What I found fascinating is when one of the guys in the Whitmer kidnapping just says, we'll just make a demonstration and send the shells over to the media so they can see that we're tough guys. And the FBI goes, no, you got to go ahead with the kidnapping. So the point to make here is that it's the FBI that is pushing a plot forward that would not have gone forward without them. And so the big question I think your book raises is, listen, what makes us think that they didn't use the same playbook, the same recipe on the national stage in January 6th? And I think it's you make the argument in the book that they did.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this started out with something called Operation Cold Snap, which was launched by the FBI in the spring of 2020 to infiltrate militia groups who were planning these anti-lockdown rallies. So this was the justification to infiltrate these militia groups, one of whom in the Michigan kidnapping plot is also blamed for January 6th, the 3 percenters. We also know that there were informants in the Proud Boys. The New York Times has confirmed this. And now we know, thanks to Newsweek, and people who haven't read this really need to, an article posted a week ago, Monday, contrary to testimony by Christopher Wray, the acting AG at the time, the DOJ and FBI had at least a half dozen elite FBI teams stationed at Quantico the weekend before January 6th, who knows what they were gaming out, and they deployed hundreds of these special forces to the Capitol early on January 6th, Capitol grounds and within the city. Well, Dinesh, what were they doing? We've seen tons of video from January 6th and photographs. I don't see anyone early in the day wearing ATF jackets or FBI gear to explain, to show to the crowd, here we are. They were all undercover. And that's why Tom Cotton asked this week, the DOJ, how many plainclothes officers or agents from DOJ were in the crowd or inside the building that day, and DOJ refused to answer.
Absolutely. And they've also, I think, refused to divulge the degree of FBI involvement in January 6th. I've seen a number of cases where they're asked point blank, most recently by Ted Cruz, about Ray Epps and about FBI involvement. And I think the very fact that they won't answer is itself their answer. It's very telling. It's very incriminating. Guys, you need to go out and get this book, January 6th by Julie Kelly. Hot off the press, must reading. Thanks, Julie, very much for coming on the podcast.
Dinesh, thank you so much, and thanks for helping me cover this whole issue.
Absolutely.